What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and we have a really great guest today, Dr. Robert Zeitlin. Dr. Robert Zeitlin is a positive psychologist, author, co-host of the podcast I Am the Worst Parent Ever, and parenting expert. He just published an updated stuck-at-home edition to his book, Laugh More, Yell Less, a guide to raising kick-ass kids. When he isn't locked down in a pandemic, Robert works in schools and leads groups of teens and parents who want to talk about the things that matter most: stress and expectations, mental health, drugs and alcohol, and orientation and identity. Robert, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. How is your day going today?
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here. My day is going really well today. It's been an amazing couple of days, actually.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad to hear that people are having multiple good days during COVID-19 times. Because
it's always good to string a couple together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you get 3 in a row, that's like a turkey, right?
Right.
Bowling. So,
right.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad that you're joining me. You have some really amazing things to talk about, and I'm really excited for you to share about them. But before we get into the interview, or we're in the interview, but before we go any further, I would like to ask you to share a good story with myself and my audience. I love good stories. I love telling them. I love hearing them. So do you have a good story to share with us?
Sure. I was just actually reminded so a year ago today, I was on a mountaintop in the middle of Peru with my 20-year-old daughter. And the two of us had taken a trip together at the end of her semester abroad. And we were in a group of like 14 or 15 people that were taking a 5-day trek up and down these mountains, ending up in Machu Picchu. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I've seen a couple of the amazing things in the world. And this is one of those that's not just a picture. Like when you're there, you're just awestruck from like the beginning to the end. So a year ago today, we woke up early in the village at the base of Machu Picchu, Aguas Calientes. And the choice was, do you want to take a bus that goes on this switchback trail all the way up to the mountain, which is this incredible village that they unearthed at the top of this mountain? Or do you want to climb these steps that were built by Incans, centuries ago? And we're like, even though we're 5 days into this, we're doing the steps. Like there's no way we're getting on a bus and going up there. Yeah. And so everyone else gets up at 7 or 8. We get up at 4 or 5 and get up before the sun's really up and start to climb these steps. And the steps are basically, if there's that switchback road, the steps are in between. they're in the forest in between those switchbacks. So you like climb like 50 steps and then you get to a little road and then you get a little break and then you climb 50 more. And if anyone's ever done like a Stairmaster or an elliptical, it's sort of like a sprint and then a flat and then a sprint and a flat. Mm-hmm. And we basically did that for like 2 straight hours until the sun rose and we got up to Machu Picchu and we get to there and all these buses and, 90% of the people that are there have driven there. But the rewarding feeling of climbing those last steps and getting up there ourselves, it was a topper of a magnificent trip. And I can't forget it. Now we're going through the pictures a year later. Our whole group is still on WhatsApp, like communicating and sending pictures around. And so it's so cool, like celebrating the anniversary right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great analogy of life, just taking the stairs and climbing your way.
You got to take the stairs if you can. I mean, I don't know. The Incans apparently were shorter than us, but somehow those stairs are each like 18 inches tall. So it was not just like little steps that got you up there. Each step was like a major like climb. So it was tough, but I was very proud of myself and proud of everyone that did the whole walk with us. It was amazing.
That's awesome. They should sell T-shirts at the top that say, "I climbed up to Machu Picchu." Not like I with the shirt. But.
Yeah, totally.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited about all the work that you're doing, just helping people, young and old, and everything that you're doing with positive psychology. And those two words generally don't go well together, or don't go often together, right?
Right.
Positive and psychology. So
Exactly.
what is so what is positive psychology?
Yeah, it's kind of the joke that I say is it's kind of reverse psychology, right? Like psychology is about like sadness and depression and anxiety and how do you help people, and so it's really a problem solving science, or it's a problem solving specialty, at least the way it's been practiced for the last 100 years, because people have problems and psychologists are uniquely suited to solve them, to diagnose them and actually to treat them. And one of the things about problem solving is you need a problem to have
Mm-hmm.
to solve. Positive psychology grew up in the last 20 or so years, and it's grown on the other side of the hill, basically the hill that the sun hits, where you think about the things that actually make you feel happiness, and the things that make you thrive, and the things that encourage you to flourish in your life. And so positive psychology is not taking you up off the ground when you stumbled and brushing you off. But basically, that's the only skill that I had before I hit positive psychology, is I could get you off the ground and brush you off and say, okay, go back to work, good job, or get back on the field. But now I meet people where they are and I help them create an upward spiral and take off from there.
Yeah, that's great. And I love all of that because it just sounds like we're working on fun and we're
Mm-hmm.
working on, just endorphins and all that good stuff. I do have a question about positive psychology and becoming happier. What makes people happy, or what makes people happier?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I work with a lot of parents and they come to me and ultimately their single most important purpose, I just want to raise a happy kid. But happiness is one of those destinations you don't actually buy a ticket to. It's something you work towards. And so what makes people happier is actually exercising their character strengths. And I've relabeled them superpowers because they just strike me that way. There's 24 of them in positive psychology, things like curiosity and creativity. And the research shows that happiness comes from building those kind of strengths, creating habits where you use them every day. When people talk about, if you find your ideal job, then you'll never work a day in your life or something like that.
Hmm.
If you actually exercise these strengths, that's what it is about those jobs, that you're actually exercising your character strengths, not just doing a job that feels good, but you're actually growing and becoming stronger yourself. So that's how you get to happiness, is actually practice these character strengths.
That's great. And it sounds like there's a lot of science behind the character strengths. So where did they come from? I mean, I guess they've always been around, but who decided, these were the 24 and that evolved for us to understand it?
Right. You're exactly right. They've always been around. The 24 were actually found in plain sight by a team that culled through over 3 years, a 3-year research study that culled through all the great histories, all the great philosophies, all the great religious texts, from the Bible to the Quran to the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, all of these across different cultures and across different times. What were the virtues that came out most often and most frequently? And they pulled out the 24 that were most common and most prominent, and then they organized them and categorized them. That's how they got the 24 strengths that form the basis of the research in positive psychology.
Yeah, that's great. And I took the test because you sent it to me. And I got a few of my top characteristics, which is honesty and creativity,
Mm-hmm.
which was, I guess, neither one of those were surprises to me. So, why is it important to know what your character strengths are? I mean, because there's 24 of them. I mean, we all got them. So, why is that important?
Right. And the cool part about the results you got from that survey was these are your top strengths, these are your middle strengths, these are your bottom strengths. Everyone always goes to the bottom, like, where am I weak in? But
Hmm.
actually, if you look at the top and you find things like honesty and creativity, and you figure out ways to use them more, the reason they're important is if you can find, in terms of your listeners, a career or a job or something that allows you to exercise character strengths you enjoy using, then you not only end up doing a good job, but you actually end up feeling gratified and growing your inner strength too. So the important part is it's actually, believe it or not, it's not important to know what's at the top or the bottom, just which ones you want to exercise more. I've actually had people I've worked with pick the very top strength and say, tell me how we can create a habit around this. And I've had people look at that list and at the last one, because really you're just ranking them yourself, right? You just went through the survey and you said, this sounds like me, this doesn't sound like me, this sounds a little like me. And then they rank according to how you've rated those questions. So this person took the very bottom one and said, creativity is something I used to do, but I don't really do anymore. Can we find out a way to do that? And the cool part is when we sat down with her friends and designed a plan, they're all like, what do you mean you're not creative? You're the most creative person we know. And so sometimes we don't even sort of see these things in ourselves, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you pick your top or your bottom strength, as long as you're just finding ways to use it every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like you can maybe try to turn one of your weaknesses into a strength, or at least get it higher on the pecking order, perhaps.
Definitely.
No, that's great. I love that. Because I was looking at it and I was like, my kindness isn't my number one or even in my top 5. And I was like, man, that's I was a little disappointed on that. And I was like, maybe I need to work on this. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So we would take the thing that resonated for you the most, like kindness jumped out for you, and be like, okay, like what can we do to create a habit, where you can just do that on a small basis, on a regular basis. It's almost like, if you've ever been to the gym and you do this one exercise, it doesn't feel like it makes a big difference, but it's actually like the linchpin thing that allows you to do other exercises. So you can actually just build a very small habit and start to experience some of the positive effects.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So you talked about putting together a plan. Let's delve into that. Like, how does one put together a plan? Because not everybody's going to have access to you as a, as a resource, whether it's affordability or whatever the case may be. So how can someone who doesn't have access to you or a psychologist, but does have access to the tests and their results, put together a plan?
So there's a couple ways. One is the survey itself is run by an organization. It's not me. I have a portal that goes there so people can take it and we can discuss their results. But the organization itself actually offers, with the results, add-on reports that you can get more information with them. So you can actually sort of do your own sort of do-it-yourself, build a plan. But they also have, besides me, like other kind of coaches that can help with that. But you can also sort of do this research on your own. And honestly, it actually doesn't take a ton of research. If I told you, go take the survey, which is free, and pull out a superpower like kindness and like brainstorm with a friend or a mentor or maybe a coach, one way that you could do a little act of kindness every day. It's just a matter of sort of building a habit and maybe keep track of it. At the end of the day, you're just going to write down one thing that you did that was kind for someone else. And it almost doesn't matter if you track it or you count it. You don't need to like keep a record or see some progress. You really just need sort of the habit of maybe writing it down or texting a friend. Like I call that an accountability buddy. A great example is like gratitude, right? People that want to exercise gratitude, one idea I have is at the end of the day, on Post-its by your bed, write down 3 things you were grateful for today, right? And it doesn't matter if you keep the Post-it. It doesn't matter if you look at the Post-it. It doesn't matter if you share like you can literally throw out the Post-it when you're done. It's just a matter of building the habit where at the end of the day, I'm going to be writing down 3 things I was grateful for. And the cool part about that is that eventually you start to like look around for things during the day that you're going to write down later. Oh man, that was really cool. I have to remember I was grateful for that. And so not only are you building the habit of writing it down every day and being more grateful, you're now building the habit of every day you're starting to look for places to be grateful, and you're growing that superpower as you go along.
No, that's great. And having things that you can practice is very key to getting things going. So you got to practice these things in order to develop yourself in them. So how does one get in the habit of practicing developing these strengths and these character traits? Like how does one go from 0 to like, I'm actually doing this every single day?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people are trying to like break bad habits or create new habits. And there's some ideas out there that you need 30 days or 45 days of doing something before you can kind of create the neural pathway. But it turns out actually there's a framework called the Tiny Habits Framework, which I love. And it's from a guy named BJ Fogg at Stanford. But also I think James Clear talks about it in his Atomic Habits. And the idea is you can actually create a tiny habit by creating your own little packaged feedback loop that kind of makes it easier to practice and makes it easier to sort of reinforce yourself for doing. And that's the core of an online course I developed with videos, which is just 30 minutes of videos total. It's 10 lessons that actually has you take that survey you just took with the superpowers and then has you take it through the process of actually building a tiny habit like that. So you have to be intentional about it is the answer to your question. And it's actually easier than some people think. But if you just can create a way to trigger yourself, which is the beginning of the tiny habit framework, and then do the habit and then sort of celebrate it afterwards, do something that even feels maybe a little corny, you create that little dopamine hit that says, oh, that was cool. I'm going to do that again next time.
No, that's great. And triggers are a huge part of bad habits and also good habits. So give me an example of that 3-step process of something that someone could practically do.
So one example that worked for me was I found myself looking at my phone too much in the car. So one habit I wanted to create was to get in the car and to face my phone away from me in the cup holder. And so every time I got in the car, I put my phone down and that was the trigger. I saw the cup holder and I would put the phone the other way, which is doing the habit. And then I actually had a kind of, let's call it deluxe little celebration afterwards, which was sort of like a little dance move and a little like a line from a song, but just sort of like, it was this little like hokey little thing that I did, which I could do myself privately in the car and sort of crack myself up without being embarrassed by other people. But like it was, trigger, cup holder, turn the phone around and celebrate. And I felt good about myself, even though it was a little hokey, the dance, but I felt good that I was making myself safer, making it safer for other people on the road. It all reinforced that good behavior.
No, that's great. I think I might do like a bicep kiss or something like that.
Exactly. That's a perfect celebration.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So why is it important to develop these 24 strengths? Like, what will it do? I mean, obviously you're not developing all 24 of them, or maybe you are, but why is it important to develop yourself in these things that we have just talked about?
That's a great question. So we started off talking about the difference between traditional psychology and positive psychology. So here's the great example that answers that question. In traditional psychology, or in traditional like emotional distress, we all probably know what it feels like to have sort of a downward spiral of a feeling of we haven't gotten what we wanted, nothing's going right. We look at the worst parts of our day, and we can, in just a couple of minutes, probably think ourselves pretty deep into a couch in a downward spiral. So what happens with positive psychology and exercising these character strengths is if you do what we've been talking about and create a regular habit around one of your superpowers, what the research shows is you actually create an upward spiral, which is crazy, but it actually leads to, in the lab, they've researched and found greater health. It leads people to broaden and be able to open up to more input. So you're basically increasing your focusing ability, and you're also increasing like your mental strength and your stamina. So there are all these positive results that create this upward spiral. And in my experience doing it myself, it basically puts me on the road to meeting other people who I'm supposed to meet. Like you and I met because I took a chance and joined a group and we connected. And there was something about what I was putting out and what you were putting out that brought us together. I think that's all part of that upward spiral for me.
Right. So having more focus and more stamina is absolutely important to us because, we're grown-ups who want to do some really cool things. But like, let's say, it's a younger person. They're like, well, focus and stamina, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
So what are some other benefits?
So, I mean, another way to look at it is most of the young people that I work with in schools and in my practice are looking at ways of feeling better about themselves, feeling better about their lives. And there's two kinds of feeling better, basically. There's sort of the short version that actually doesn't grow anything, and then there's the long version. And these are things that I look at as the difference between pleasure and gratification. And so pleasure is sort of like the sugary snack that you grabbed because you're starving when you walk in the house. But like a half hour later, you come down off that sugar high and you're like, I'm still hungry. And gratification is actually like planning out, I'm going to have a snack with me. So on the bus home, I can have something and then I'm not starving when I hit the door. And I know it's something healthy. Not that everything needs to be like healthy and nutritious, but character strengths are something that you can exercise that actually grow something in you. They actually leave a long-term benefit, but seeking pleasure, doing things that are short-term just because they feel good in the moment, actually have a very short life and they don't actually add anything to your life. So young people that I'm working with who are looking for ways to feel better are looking for what can I do and kind of invest in myself? What can I do long-term that's actually gratifying and grows something in me? Sort of like investing in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking about like the feeling of maybe accomplishing something that was difficult, the feeling you get after a workout that you did it. Those are the self-pride, I guess, is what you're to some degree talking about, as well as, just growing as a human being, which we all want to do if we really think about it, and getting better.
Exactly. Self-pride is a great way to put it. I mean, something you can actually feel more confident about because you have something you're more competent at. So it's like you're actually building something. People talk about like, how do I build my self-esteem? The way you build your self-esteem is you find more things that you're good at and you build more confidence because of that. And then you start to see yourself differently. That's the same phenomenon you're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's such a key thing. Just finding things that you're good at and just, finding something that you can contribute to the world is really important.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, we've talked about all these good positive things. Obviously, that's not the full human experience. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about like getting through things and, dealing with setbacks and dealing with bouncing back from a setback. Like you'll try something sometimes. It might not go the way you plan. You might feel like you failed, perhaps. So how does one carry on and pick themselves up and continue to move forward in a positive way from that?
Yeah, we all have setbacks. And I think one thing to think about with setbacks is where your expectations are and what you're telling yourself about the setback. Like I could walk out my door right now and trip over a root and look back and be like, root, like this was something that happened to me or something that I did, or it's something that's going to happen again. Like I start to tell myself a story. So one thing that you can do with setbacks is sort of notice the stories that you're telling and figure out where they're coming from, because you don't need to build on a setback. You can just like put it in the past, like something you tripped over. And the other thing is, like I said about expectations, is what is is a setback something that is something that's happening to you because you're on your way down, or is a setback something that's just a temporary setback, literally, from where you're going and where you're progressing? And one thing about answering this from the positive psychology point of view is you have a lot of strengths you're already using. You may not even recognize it, but a setback may just be a temporary sort of letdown of those strengths until you get back to being able to use them again.
Yeah, absolutely. And every single successful person in the world has had many, many setbacks. And it's I think that's really important to remember.
100% true. 100% true.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of which, tell me about a failure or a setback that you've had in your life that was something that you learned from, you just got a life lesson from, and it helped propel you into your future.
That's a great question. I think there's, when I think about setbacks in my own life, I think about the places where I felt like I tried something and I failed. I don't think about the setbacks that happened to me. It's kind of interesting as you grow up and you kind of get beyond the idea of like life is going to be a smooth path. I'm going to get all A's and I'm going to get the job and everything's going to work out. You can look back at your life from where I am and recognize that my life is actually shaped by a lot of the setbacks, some of which I would never trade, like as hard as they were. I would still want them because they helped me grow into who I am. So when I think about specific setbacks, I think about the ones I did to myself, meaning I tried something and it didn't work out. And I sat there feeling bad about myself, feeling bad about that I took a risk and I felt a little bit exposed and maybe felt a little bit, self-critical that I was overly ambitious, and sort of that self-critical voice comes in. And, specifically, I'll say a recent setback was I tried to launch a new workshop series and people were not showing up. And it was kind of not happening for a while, but then it started to happen. So one of the things about that setback is I recognized that it was actually about my expectations, because I wanted it all to be 100% successful right out of the gate. And in fact, it was the kind of thing that was going to be like a slow baking kind of slow growth process. And if I actually looked at it from that perspective, then I would have recognized it was just a success on the way. But in between felt like very much a failure of small degrees until we got there.
Sure. Yeah. And those things always take time to build. And it's important to remember that as we, move in those directions and create things. So as far as managing expectations, that's a very important part of life, but it's also important to have hope. And so how do you tell people to just kind of balance the two? Because, hope helps us get up and do the things that we're going to do.
Totally agree. Hope and expectations. And hope also brings me to the other part of the answer I forgot when you asked me the question was, one of the best ways to deal with setbacks is actually to connect with other people, because getting some perspective from other people, especially people that support you and lift you up, can help you put everything in perspective. So hope is one of those things, and hope is actually one of those superpowers. It's one of those things that some people sort of seem to have easier grasp on and some people struggle to find. But I think having those people in your life that can help you find that hope, or can help you put things in perspective enough so you're not sort of weighed down by it all, so you can actually find things to be hopeful about and positive news. I look on the internet, for instance, the actor John Krasinski started a web series of Some Good News when all this pandemic stuff started out. I don't know if you've seen it. And it's so powerful with so many different examples of great things that are happening. They're always happening around us, even in a crisis. So one thing to do to build hope is to reach out to a connection and put things in perspective. And another is to sort of look around for the things that are working.
Yeah, absolutely. And to tack on to what you were just saying, there was something that I was disappointed about the other day. I called a good friend of mine and we just talked it through. I felt a lot better. And I also follow, I think it's called Tank's Good News. It's an Instagram account that all they do is pump out good, positive things that are happening. And that helps me because I'm just like, it's that's not all gloom and doom. So
that's awesome. That's one of the best things about Instagram is it can be a source like that. Do you know the story about the kid that was, I think the kid that was bullied in high school and started like an anonymous Instagram account? This is a few years back. They started to highlight like the good things about everyone in the school, just anonymously started posting things. And it was like, it's the opposite of what Instagram often can be and most social media, but it's amazing the opportunity. I know so many people that use Instagram and other social media to like get that affirmation or get that positive thing or the joke of the day kind of. It's just an amazing source of hope, of perspective, and of ways to like connect with other people. It's really cool.
Yeah, that right there, when you said that did something in me because I was just like, saying positive things about all the people at your school, like that's what we need.
Super positive. And what an amazing response to actually struggling with their own trauma is actually turning around and saying, I'm going to add to this community. I'm going to add something to this community. I'm going to add value to this community. It was so powerful.
No, that's great. Man, I'm a hold on to that, and I'm just going to be a positive light everywhere I go today. So that's great. And in the future, not just today. That's great. Now, as we're talking about good positive things, I have to bring it back to something that's a little negative just because I do want to hear from you on this topic. What is a common detrimental mistake that you see amongst young people that, that you feel like you just need to address or talk about?
Mm. I would say that the most common sort of theme that comes up by the time I end up talking to young people, they've taken an incident, a situation, a relationship, and it's just like we're talking about things out of context. It seems in the moment, especially in those darker moments and those moments when we tend to be isolated from other people. A side story is actually one teenager who said, my parents didn't realize what they were doing when they took my social media away. They were actually isolating me from the kind of support you and I were just talking about. Mm-hmm. And so when young people come to me and they have been struggling with something, it's often because it was very hard to put it in perspective. Like they knew that it was the worst day of their lives. They knew it was a combination of things that drove them to the brink of potentially self-destructive behavior. But they mm-hmm. also recognized that in perspective, that it was actually part of a larger thing, larger pattern, either in those people they were hanging out with or in themselves or in their families. And getting that perspective on it, starting to see the difference between how much it seemed like the biggest wave ever to recognizing that it was just really a bunch of water that was part of a larger ocean, and mm-hmm. be able to sort of dissipate how important that felt in the moment among all the experiences, and starting to see the patterns allowed them to start to feel more control over it as opposed to feeling controlled by it.
Yeah, right. And, just knowing that life is long in mm-hmm. a positive way. Mm-hmm. So whatever happens today or whatever happened, yesterday, it's just part of a journey, and, you're going to have plenty ahead of you. So
exactly.
That's good.
And if that journey is like a video game, it's a matter of figuring out the next steps so you can get to the next level. And if you start to view it in that way, it's really all a learning experience. It's not about like mm-hmm. wins and losses.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn.
I love that.
Yeah, I stole it from somewhere, but it's really good.
It works.
Yeah. So speaking of mistakes, you share with me some stuff about the authentic voice versus the social mammoth, mm-hmm. And how that is a mistake, listening to the wrong voices. And so could you just kind of expound on what that is? And first tell us what it is, or first, sure. Speak on what it is.
Yeah, sure. So we don't realize it. I'll speak for myself. I didn't realize it, that all the voices in my head that were telling me I couldn't do things and I shouldn't try things were actually this sort of self-protective voice that kind of developed over the years to keep me safe. And this one thing that I shared, you could put in your notes maybe, is this idea of that voice being genetically like an evolutionary mammoth that we're carrying around. That's mm-hmm. actually our social protective mammoth that's like following us around saying, don't talk to them. Don't go over there. Don't take this chance. Don't take this risk. And for the longest time, I'll admit I was really ruled by those voices. And some people call it sort of your monkey mind or your lizard brain. But these are ultimately really there to keep you safe. Unfortunately, they also keep you safe from doing anything that helps you grow or change. So the authentic voice you're referring to is that little voice inside you that actually was the same little voice that was there before you started to develop all these self-protective habits. So you can picture yourself maybe as like a toddler who is kind of exploring the world and like taking chances and like figuring stuff out. Like you're just a learning machine. And you have all these superpowers that we were just talking about of creativity and curiosity. But that authentic voice gets quieted over the years because that self-protective layer gets really strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And fear is sometimes a good thing if your life is in danger. But, oftentimes fear holds us back from doing the things that we will open up our life. And so, I'm glad you shared about that.
Totally.
How does one hear their authentic voice better?
Yeah, that's a good challenge. That's a great question. For me, the formula that I've used and that I work with people on is getting to the point where you can actually exercise those superpowers. I know I sound like a broken record, but before that point, actually, is creating some space where you can actually make a little bit of a choice. And what I mean by that is there's this thing that happens to all of us when something happens to us and we react. There's sort of like a knee jerk sort of one thing triggers the next, bing, bam, boom. It's almost like automatic and you don't actually think about it. You're just reacting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get to the point where something is happening to you, but you pause for even a microsecond before you respond, then you actually build in a little bit of power over the situation where you can actually choose, do I want to respond? How do I want to respond? And even when you're starting out, you still may respond the same way you would have reacted. It's just still automatic. But eventually, using some things for me that slowed things down, like mindfulness and being able to like do some breathing exercises, allowed me to open up that space, and that space gave me a little more power. And the way my authentic voice started to get some room to talk was to have a little bit of space there where I wasn't ruled by my reactions and my self-protective voices.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I started to be able to question, well, maybe I can, or maybe it's not so risky. And when that started, things started to really change for me.
No, that's great. And my last guest also spoke on mindfulness, and gosh, it's so important, mindfulness and meditation. Speaking of which, how are you coping with the stress during the pandemic? You're a professional at this, right? And so what are you doing to keep yourself happy, to keep yourself sane, so on and so forth?
That's a great question. I think the assumption is that psychologists have it all figured out and they're model citizens. I think we're like everyone else, but also the stuff that I was just talking about, the stuff that allowed me to slow things down. Once I stopped feeling sort of thrown around like I was in a wave, like if you're ever down at the ocean and you kind of like get a little in over your feet and all of a sudden you're like tossed around by a wave. That's how it felt at first with the pandemic. I felt very like I didn't know which way it was up for a minute.
Yeah.
But then eventually I found my way to my feet. And then eventually on my feet, so to speak, I reminded myself of the things that I do that slow things down and ground things for me, make things more handleable. And for me, that's actually meditation, which I couldn't figure out how to do for years and years and years, but now I have found a way to do it. And also literally exercising superpowers, especially creativity, like making something new in the world feels like it's almost like the antidote to all the destructive things that feel like they're happening in the world, like creating something positive. So that's a superpower that I've been leaning on a lot, writing and creating, getting on to talk with people like you. I published a new edition of my book for parents, and that's been a serious help to me. I know a lot of the people that have picked up hobbies and started to like paint or do other things. Like there are ways to put positive energy out, even if a lot of the news and everything that's coming back at you is on the more negative or destructive end.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. I love all of that.
Thanks.
So, all right. So we're almost out of time. And so what I would like to do is the last question I have for you is, what are some, besides what you shared, what is a principle or habit that has helped you become successful in life?
A principle that has helped me be successful in life is, I'm going to paraphrase a guru of mine, Seth Godin, and his line walking into a new thing, taking a risk is, this might not work. And taking that mental framework in with me is not like the armor that I used to walk in with where I was like, I'm going to be successful. This is going to kill. I'm going to like, but it's actually sort of like, it's like some of those martial arts that aren't about weapons. They're about like open hand. And it's like walking in and saying, this might not work. I'm going to give it a try. We'll see. It's all learning. It's all an experience. So that principle of this might not work has helped me walk into situations and feel a little less defensive. I've been more with my eyes open and been able to pay attention to what's going on and learn from the experience so I can go and try it again next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is that it also might work, and also that the next time you try it, you'll have all the lessons from your
Exactly.
first one. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it does work. And it's also like if you walk in all defended and you're like holding your breath and like closing your eyes and oh my gosh, then you don't get a chance to gain, like you said, from the experience and be able to take your lesson from this and make it work next time.
Mm-hmm. Great. That's awesome. All right. Well, I really appreciate our time together. I like to end my interviews with some freestyle rapping. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay. All right. So here we go. All right. Check. Yo, coming off the top. Okay. I'm coming up scholarly, positive psychology. What we gotta see up in our minds, a whole bunch of traits, maybe 24. Yo, we create and make some more things up in our minds. That's what we do. You gotta practice, and that's what I say all the freaking time. Build up your strength, the top to the bottom, maybe even the middle. I come with a riddle. I'm talking about the things that we could grow, so we basically know how we could be people that are expanded, not just things that I be doing to feel good in the neighborhood. I gotta feel full, and that's why I'm not learning in school, coming off the top, words nonstop, and that's what I say. Yo, I just play creativity. That's creativity, having fun. That's how I run. And that's what I say all the freaking time. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you go back with something better. And that's what I say. You come through and weather the things that you've been through. And then you get better, spitting off the top. That's what I'm saying. Yo, I bounce back with a bunch of raps. You got to come through and get some perspective. And that's what I say when you come and correct your brain all the time, because you ain't seeing the big picture. And that's what I say. I'm up in the mixture, spitting freestyles. You got a choice. Listen to the Mammoth or the authentic voice. Basically what I'm saying is you got to hear. Open up your ears and open up your third eye. And that's how I rise. Yo, I come through. And yo, I just take all my mistakes and just learn from them. And that's what I say when I come through with a pen. I'm just struggling, but I gotta keep going. Upward spiral when I be flowing, spitting out the top. And that's how I go. And that's what I said with a freestyle flow. All right.
That put such a smile on my face. That was so awesome.
I'm glad you liked it, man. I'm glad you liked it.
Very
there was
cool.
so much good things to draw from. I was like, I don't even, gosh.
That's amazing. I think about all the conversations we've had and how that all led into that is fantastic.
Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for all the nuggets. You gave me too many nuggets to grab at. I got a few of them in there, so
I love it. I love it. So cool.
Thanks. So, Robert, you've shared so much, and you continue to share so much. How can people find you, like your website and also your social media handles, whichever ones you want to share?
Sure. It's robertzeitlin.com. The website has information about my book, some information about me. You can find out more about me on social media. It's Dr. Robert Zeitlin, at Dr. Robert Zeitlin. And also for parents that are looking for like positive affirmations and positive visuals, I'm also getting really active on Pinterest with Pinterest/Laugh More, Yell Less, which is actually
Nice.
the title of my book.
Yeah. And right now we need to laugh more, and we need to yell less and get off the edge, because too many people are on edge right now. So
That's the goal.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I'll make sure to tag all of that in the show notes, as well as your program that you're putting forward and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for your time, the positive energy and work that you're contributing to the world. And I'm just looking forward to seeing more of that coming from you.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. So that was the interview. Hope you enjoyed it and that it gave you some tools to make your life better. And just so you know, kindness did make it into my top 10 character strengths. It was not number 24, but I will keep working on it daily. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you would take a quick screenshot of it and share it to your social media story and tag at Young Legends Podcast, I'd appreciate that a lot. Okay, so I hope you're well wherever you are. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay golden, pony boy. All right, so that's all I got for now. Until next time, peace.